Everyone, welcome to Data Security and PCI-DSS version 4, how your organization can prepare for compliance. This is especially relevant. PCI-DSS version 4 goes live in just a couple of days, so we're hoping that we can bring you some valuable information in this kind of final stretch towards the final rulemaking and then compliance and audit. My name's Connor. I am the product manager here at Cloud Storage Security, and I'm here with Velzar, who is the head of customer support, also here at CSS. Let's get started. So we bring it up on here. There's a lot of compliance requirements. There's a lot of frameworks. Most organizations are not subject to one or two, but it could be up to 5 or even 10 separate compliance requirements and compliance frameworks. So malware scanning is mandated by a vast majority of them. We've actually brought up the most popular ones up here on the screen for you. And of course, what we're going to focus on today, PCI DSS version 4. So what is PCI DSS? If you're not aware, we're just going to make sure everybody has the same facts here. So it's maintained by the PCI, or Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council, and it applies very broadly to all organizations who store, process, or transfer any sort of payment card information. Um, version 4.0 is the latest version of the framework. I believe version 1 was released in 2007. Don't quote me on that, but it was actually released and made public in 2022. And the way that they actually did that was they made it public, and then they said that the changes, or what was new in version 4.0, would become best practices. And so it's kind of largely focused on updating and kind of modernizing these guidelines, making sure they're accounting for all this new technology that people are adopting and organizations are adopting, including the cloud. So this transition period where PCI DSS version 4 is best practice is actually ending on March 31st of 2025. So as of April 1st, those best practices are now required under PCI DSS version 4.0. And they're subject to audit and all of the other things that come along with compliance. Yeah, April 1st. So just a couple of days becomes mandatory for all organizations. I'll say it again: storing and processing or transferring a payment card information. So who does PCI DSS version 4 apply to? So this is taken directly from the PCI Council's webpage. It applies to all entities that store, process, or transmit cardholder data. It covers the technical and operational components as well. So if you're a merchant or who accepts and processes payment cards, you have to comply with PCI DSS. This also includes the cloud. So if you ingest payment card information, you transfer it, you store it in the cloud, that is actually a part of the CDE, or the cardholder data environment. So the exact definition is computer systems or network group of IT systems. I think the cloud is included in that process, store, or transmit cardholder data or other sensitive payment authentication data. Another key term that we'll be covering here as well, I just want to make sure everybody knows, is PAN, or primary account numbers. So this is the credit, the debit, the prepaids that identifies the issuer as well as the cardholder accounts. So all of that information is considered in scope of PCI DSS version 4. To clarify and just kind of hammer this point home, PCI DSS version 4 applies to the entirety of the CDE, the cardholder data environment, including, like I said earlier, object storage. I'm going to pass it off to Velazar here, where he's going to kind of explain a little bit of why we think that PCI DSS has expanded its controls, and kind of the operational and organizational considerations made by the council.
Awesome. Thank you, Connor. Just a heads up, I did turn off my camera, so apologies about that for anyone watching. The little Wi-Fi signal is giving me some issues there on the top right-hand side of the screen. But with that said, when it comes to PCI, and really any of these frameworks, a lot of folks take into consideration the physical layer. So if you have physical machines that are storing data in them, but what they're missing is the cloud layer, and specifically the data layer within the cloud. So the big things that you want to take into consideration are going to be uh, all of those different files that you're ingesting within your environment, especially if you're storing financial data within your environment. You want to know, do you know what's actually being uploaded? Do you trust the source of that data? And do you trust how it's being processed through your environment? And is it reaching your customers, your partners, your employees, whoever it may be, properly and securely? Meaning, are all the files clean that are ending up downstream in the hands of somebody else? Um, and I think most importantly, do you have a way that you can guarantee whether or not files you're ingesting are clean? So as more and more data is being stored in the cloud, over 60% of data being stored in the cloud, uh, the same thing is happening with breaches, data breaches. 40% of data breaches were cloud-based just last year alone. So attackers are looking at what's going on within just the world, the industry, and they're seeing that they can take advantage of this downstream risk that's created and use it as a way to inject infected files into your environment. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about PCI and the requirement 5 within PCI, which focuses specifically on uh, malware and protecting against malware, whether it's at the network level or anywhere else. So there's multiple sections of requirement 5, and the first one is section 5.1. Now, Section 5.1 states that your organization has a mechanism in place that protects all systems and networks from malicious software. And you have to have some type of plan and documentation around this protection. So that means you have to have policies and procedures that allow you to protect against malware. So making sure that all of this is documented is the first step in Section 5 for PCI. Along with that documentation comes documenting the roles and responsibilities amongst your team as well. So it all starts with just documentation and organizational awareness of who's doing what and how you're all working together to protect against malicious files. Now, Section 5.2 goes into it a little bit more and actually requires you to have something that protects against malicious software, against malware. So, as it states in 5.21, an anti-malware solution is deployed on all system components except for those system components identified in periodic evaluations per requirement 5.2.3. Now, this includes Amazon S3 buckets. This includes object storage in general, whether it's Amazon, Azure, Google Cloud, so on and so forth, as well as other services like EBS and EFS on the AWS side and FSX. So this includes all of those different services where you have to have some type of solution that detects malware and removes the infected file from that storage volume. Now, going a little bit further into 5.2 here, we have the section 5.2.3 that states any system components that are not at risk for malware are evaluated periodically to include the following: a documented list of all system components not at risk for malware, identification and evaluation of evolving malware threats or those system components, and then confirmation whether such system components continue to require anti-malware protection. So you may have pieces of your environment that may not require malware protection, and that's entirely up to you to define. And essentially, you have to define whether you're comfortable with taking on that risk to say, this particular piece of my environment does not require malware protection. We would argue that if you're storing files in the cloud, especially if they're files that are ingested into your environment from an unknown source, like an end user or customer, or even worse, a public source or an unknown source where you're just gathering data from all sorts of places, you should certainly scan that data, because one way or another, that data is going to be accessed by someone someday, whether it's, again, a user, an employee, a partner, whoever it may be, will most likely access it. And you can argue, sure, I have endpoint protection on my machine. But as we've seen before, and as we've talked about before, endpoint protection can only do so much. Every single antivirus vendor is going to depend on different virus signatures and have different knowledge of threats out there. So no antivirus vendor is going to be perfect. And the idea here is you want to eliminate the threat of any infected files as they enter, rather than have to deal with the downstream effect. Ultimately, though, that will be a decision you and your organization will have to make. Now, Section 5.3 goes a little bit more in depth on keeping an anti-malware solution within your organization. And again, this applies not only to endpoint protection, but any anti-malware solution that you deem is necessary for protecting any files that you're ingesting in your environment. 5.3 states that you need a way for an anti-malware solution to have automatic updates for signatures, for example, and for the solution itself, the scanning engine itself that's doing the work. Along with that, it states you either need to perform periodic scans and real-time scans of files, or some type of behavioral analysis of all of your systems in order to see whether or not they're infected or not, and in order to see, are there any anomalies that are happening. And this is specific to the anti-malware solution. It can do one or the other or both. Along with that, and this I found very interesting, and I'm really glad they included it, is you need to be able to include logs and make sure that logs are enabled and retained for any anti-malware solution that you have. So again, whether it's an endpoint solution that needs to phone home and let you as the administrator know that an infected file has been found on a user's machine, or it's an anti-malware solution that is deployed within your environment, you'll want some way for it to be able to keep track of everything that it's finding. So let's get into a little bit about our solution here at Cloud Storage Security. I'm going to go ahead and steal the screen from you, Connor. Uh, There we go. Okay. So when it comes to our solution here at CSS, we provide an antivirus solution for your cloud environments, whether it's AWS, whether it's Azure or Google Cloud. We provide a solution that is able to scan all of the different files you are storing in services in any of those cloud platforms. And you can scan those files either on what we call an event basis, so scanning of new files that are entering, for example, an S3 bucket, or on what we call a retro basis, files that are already pre-existing in a storage volume. So let's take a look and see if we can find a bucket here. So in this case, we have a bucket here. Let's select this one. What we can do is we can scan all of the files within this bucket on a pre-existing basis if we needed to, where all you need to do is select the bucket, point and click, and here you'll be given the option to choose things like the date range of How far back do you want to go? You may have files that have been stored in this bucket for years upon years, potentially unscanned. So you may want to scan all files since the beginning of time, which in this case is March 14th, technically, 2006, which is Pi Day 2006, which was when S3 was released for commercial availability. But once you select how you want to, what you want to scan and how you want to scan it, you can perform the scan. And what we'll do in the background is we will spin up a scan job that will perform the work of scanning all of those pre-existing files within your bucket. Along with that, you can also scan files within a bucket as they come in as well. So this means that if I have a bucket that's ingesting information, that's ingesting data, I should say, from an application, you can have everything in that bucket as it's written to the bucket be scanned after it's been written. And all you need to do here is find a bucket. Again, let's find a good one here. I want to make sure. Let's try this one. All you need to do is find a bucket, select the little shield. Oh no, changing bucket protection failed. Always on a demo will we see issues. But select the little shield. It will essentially turn from red to green after about 10 seconds or so. And once that happens, what we'll do in the background is we will add an event listener to that bucket. That event listener will raise an event anytime a file is written to that bucket and send a message off to an SNS topic. That SNS topic will interpret that event and it will send a message off to an SQS queue. That message will include things like the type of file, file size, path of the file, so on and so forth. And we'll have scanning agents sitting in the region that that you have data to scan in, which will pick up those messages and use them to scan the files within this bucket that have been uploaded. So there's multiple ways you can scan files here. One last thing I'll mention real quick as well is if you need to be able to comply with some type of compliance, whether it's PCI or anything else that requires you to have periodic malware scanning, we actually offer the ability to perform scheduled scans on files within storage volumes that are pre-existing. So you can pick a S3 bucket, for example. You can pick an EBS volume, for example, and you can create a schedule based on a specific frequency. So let's say we want to do every January and maybe we want to do every June. So every 6 months, we want to scan files on the first day of the month. We can set this would be bi-yearly. So we can set a bi-yearly scan to happen on a scheduled basis where we will have this schedule as long as it's active. We will have this schedule running and it will run based on the frequency that it's set and scan pre-existing files. So it's a very flexible solution, especially if you need to be able to scan a lot of data or a very little amount of data for you to be able to meet this PCI requirement and abide by PCI fully. So with that said, we've got a few extra minutes here. Connor, I'll hand it off back to you and we can wrap this up.
Awesome. Thank you, Velazar. Just going to wait for these slides to kind of load up here. Oh, there we go. So how do we help? Compliance is something hard to navigate. It's pretty difficult. It can get overwhelming. So what we try to do is provide you guys the simplest, the easiest to configure, and the most plug-and-play solution on the market. So we do malware protection for all of the major AWS storage services, as well as Azure and GCP. So S3, EBS, EFS, FSX, Azure Blob, and Google Cloud Storage. The reason that we have all these together is that you can control everything in the cloud. You can control your entire CDE, your cardholder data environment, all from a singular console. So you get in there, you protect all those buckets, you set it, and then you forget it. And then you can manage the malware automatically through quarantining, and other remediation options. We also give you the ability to push that information in Splunk so you can see that the solution is working. You can see that this part of your security suite that could be 50, 100 different services. You check it, you make sure it's running and actually scanning files, and then you're good to go. We set and forget. That's the way that we operate here. Thank you everyone for attending. We'll stick around for a couple minutes in case anybody has any questions. You can reach out to sales@cloudstoragestech.com if you want to get started. We got a couple days before version 4 becomes law. So there's a 30-day free trial where you can go in there. You can deploy in under 15 minutes. And you can actually get some free data to go ahead and baseline, test throughput, things like that. Just tool around in our solution as much as you'd like. So yeah, that'd be great. And also, make sure to tune in for part 2, tentatively scheduled for the end of April, where we're going to dive into configuring the native services to kind of ensure compliance with PCI-DSS. So this is one component of actually satisfying the regulations. There's also a different part of PCI-DSS, and that includes proper configuration for, let's say, DynamoDB or SNS or anything that could actually store or hold or transmit PAN or PCI information.
And I think it's also important to note uh, all of these different compliance frameworks have some type of requirement where you need to be able to scan for malware. It's not just a nice to have, it's a must have at the end of the day. And a lot of people think, again, scanning for malware, well, I'll just do it at the endpoint level, or maybe I'll just do it on my servers, possibly, or my EC2 instances. But the data that you're storing in things like something like S3 or any other type of cloud storage service is fair game. And a lot of the time that data is coming in from unknown or public sources that you may or may not trust. So, and like I had said earlier, a lot of the time, whenever you ingest a file, that file will most likely at some point in time end up on someone's machine and be opened, be executed, so on and so forth. So this is something that you don't want to overlook within your organization because it only takes one file. It only takes one instance for an incident to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, Falzar. We'll answer some questions here. Looks like we do have one. Oh, technical difficulties. Okay, we apologize for that. I'm going to reach out to our webinar service provider and I'll make sure to bring that up with them. I'll also email you and make sure that you have the recording of this talk. I believe Bright Talk should actually email that to you automatically, but I'll send you an email just to make sure you can watch it front to back if you'd like to go ahead and do that. Apologies again. We'll make sure this is solved. Okay. There's no other questions with that. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We appreciate your time today. And do reach out to us if you have any questions, you want to talk to someone. Compliance is difficult, and we're here to help. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.